Morning everyone, here at Mount Gawler this morning, VK5 SE013 for the soda chasers. Thought it would be an appropriate spot to talk to you this morning about getting into portable HF on a budget, especially if you're new to the hobby, you've maybe just got your license, and probably talking primarily about F-calls here. But you know, what we talk about is applicable to most license holders, but probably the F-calls make up the majority of the people who are new and wanting to get into the hobby. So what we're going to talk about this morning, things like radios, what might be ones to consider, antennas, coax, and power sources. So pretty much the fundamentals of getting started and getting up on air. So hope you enjoy it. If you do, please thumbs up, please subscribe. It really helps me work out how popular the videos are, and you know, how many people are watching it, and you know, what to do next. So much appreciated. All right, let's kick off. Alright, so the first thing we'll talk about is the all-important radio. What do you need? What's a good one to get started with? And you know, it's probably the biggest investment you'll make in this hobby at the moment anyway, until you get into, you know, amplifiers and towers and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, the HF radio that you're going to choose to go portable is key to your success, as much as the antenna is as well. So one of the, I guess, the lower price or lower cost radios, and the one that's easiest to get into, especially for the F-calls who are limited to 10 watts, is probably the good old Yaesu FT817, which is a QRP radio, 5 watt radio. So it doesn't sound like much, but you'd be surprised at what you can do. And as a matter of fact, I just happen to have one here right now. There we go, the good old FT817. It's a really small radio, okay, really lightweight. And one of the more important things about it is that it has a very low current draw. Okay, very simple. Okay, VFO knob, on/off button, and you know, a couple of other little ones here as well. One of the key things with this radio is that it has two antenna connectors: a BNC connector on the front and the good old PL259 on the back. So it gives you a few options there of what connections you want to use. It also has a battery pack built into it. I think it comes with a AA battery tray that can go in here. I've actually bought an aftermarket battery pack from a brand called WinCamp, which I think is a lithium-ion battery pack, which goes in. You take the original door off, put this on, and you can use. It gives you a little bit more capacity, which is great. But you can use whatever you want. There's obviously a DC power connector in there, so you can connect it up to whatever you need to connect to in terms of power. But in terms of cost, this is probably one of the cheaper ones, especially second hand. Okay, but they have been superseded now, I think, by the 818, I think it is. But for all intents and purposes, these are really good radios, so certainly check them out if you'd like. Okay, the next radio that I'm going to show you is one that I've had for a long time. In fact, it was my very first radio I ever purchased about a week before I got my license, and that is the ICOM 706 Mark II-G. Got my helper standing off camera, she's too shy to show her face. This radio is a 100 watt radio, and it's pretty much a shack in a box, they call it. And you don't see a lot of them coming up on the second-hand market, and if you do, for some reason people seem to think they're worth a lot of money. They're not the world's most, I guess, advanced radio these days. Okay, they are fairly old in their design, but it is a solid radio, a reliable radio, and quite a capable radio. Okay, the disadvantage in terms of portability with this is that it is heavy. Okay, it weighs about the same as a brick, and it draws a fair bit of power even on receive. Okay, so it is a portable rig, but yeah, like I said, reliable, but probably maybe a little bit out of reach and probably a little bit over the top for maybe, you know, if you're just starting out. The final rig that I've got here to show you is the Yaesu FT857. Now this one once again is a shack in a box. Okay, HF, VHF, UHF, and 100 watts. Not quite as heavy as the 706, and I don't think it draws quite as much power. But it is still a current rig. You can still buy this particular model from Yaesu. Really good radio. Does draw more power than the 817, but it is quite a bit more capable. Now, these are all rigs that are, I guess, portable. Okay, in the sense of the word. There are other reasons to buy rigs like that, and that is that you could possibly use them as your base radio at home if you wanted to. A lot of people will buy a dedicated base radio and a dedicated portable, but if your budget doesn't stretch that far, then your 706 or your FT857 might be something to consider there as well. But like I said, the cost of those ones are a little bit higher than the 817, so maybe have a think about that. Some other rigs that are out there, ones that are very popular, are the aircraft rigs. You can get, I think, the K3, and there may be others as well, which are really capable rigs. A lot of the hardcore SOTA and Parks and Peaks activators use those, so check them out as well. The aircraft ones, I believe, can come in kit form. Well, when I say kit, sort of assemble yourself, okay, which you'd need to check on the legalities of that. There are some restrictions on what FCalls can and can't do in terms of build your own. So anyway, so some of the other things to consider when buying a rig is you may not need to buy brand new. Okay, certainly, you know, if you're on a budget, buying second hand is the way that you're going to go. A couple of things to watch out for there. If you're buying a second hand portable rig, that's great that somebody's ready to move theirs on, but there might be a reason why they're ready to move theirs on. Okay, it may be starting to fail because it's had years of abuse and neglect. Okay, so make sure you check it out thoroughly. If you're new to the hobby and you don't really know how to put something through its paces, how to test it to make sure it's okay, maybe get in contact with your local radio club. You know, explain to them what you're doing, who you are, and I'm sure somebody will be able to give you a hand there. And the final thing that you want to consider too with any radio, particularly when you're portable, is the current draw. Okay, the 817, for example, draws 2.2 amps on transmit on HF, and it draws about 450 milliamps on receive. Now, that's reasonably low. Okay, and so you can get away with a reasonably small battery pack or a reasonably lightweight power system if you have something like that. The bigger rigs draw quite a bit more. The 100 watt rig, I think the fuse in that is a 25 amp fuse, so you're looking at, you know, well over 20 amps. So you need a decent power source in order to power them for a while. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is antennas, and pretty much there's one simple rule when we come to antennas for portable use, and that, or in any situation really, and that is any antenna is better than no antenna. Some work better than others, of course, but if you don't have one to start with, then you're not going to get on the air. So I'm going to talk about two of the most popular portable antennas, and the first one, of course, is the good old dipole. Okay. Now, if you're not up to date with antennas yet, a dipole basically is just an antenna that's, in this case, a wire antenna that's equidistant on both sides. So you have your coax feed up to the middle, and then you have a wire going off each side in two different directions there. The good thing about a dipole antenna is that it is probably one of the most popular antennas ever. Okay, it is very simple to construct yourself, which means that it can be very, very cheap to construct, and there are plans galore on the internet, so you really can't go wrong with the dipole. Couple of different ways that you can arrange a dipole, and one of the more popular ones, and one that I recommend strongly for portable use, particularly for for newcomers is what's known as the inverted V. And that is essentially the antenna has a central support column, which is where your feed point is, so your coax goes up that column and into the antenna, and then the two sides of the antenna come out and go down to either the ground or ideally a couple of maybe tree branches that are a metre or two above the ground at either end. So it forms the shape of a V that's upside down, and that gives you a good short and medium distance antenna potentially, and like I said, it's very easy to construct. The dipole can be modified to basically be a multi-band antenna, and we do that by creating what's known as a linked dipole. And all we do there is add links on each leg of the dipole such that the antenna can be lengthened or shortened to match the different bands that you want to work on. For example, this antenna does 3 bands, 40 meters, 20 meters and 10 meters. So it has a couple of links on either side, and if I want to change bands, I just either connect or disconnect the link on either side, and the antenna then becomes tuned, if you like, for that particular band. This is really handy because what it means is you don't necessarily need to purchase or invest in an antenna tuner. If you just have yourself say a dipole antenna, then you can use a tuner to use it on different bands, but once again, it's another thing that requires power, it's another thing that requires you to invest money. So building a linked dipole can save you a bit of money, also helps with learning a little bit about antenna theory. Okay, and you get yourself a decent antenna that works really well. And I must emphasize, and I'm sure others will agree with me who have done this before, that building your own antenna and getting up on air with it and making contacts is actually a really, really good feeling. It makes you feel like you've accomplished something really good, that you've learned something, and it really gives you a good shot in the arm. So I would thoroughly recommend constructing your own linked dipole antenna. Okay, and I'll put some links below to some resources to help you do that. It is quite simple, just some very simple maths, if any, and away you go. So that's my recommendation, a linked dipole. The other antenna, which is also very popular, is an end-fed antenna, and these come in all shapes and sizes, and basically an end-fed antenna, like the name suggests, is your feed line, your coax goes in at one end, and the other end of the antenna is connected to or suspended in a tree or a pole. So it's very, very simple, very easy to erect, very easy to work with. You can buy multi-band end-fed antennas, and once again, you often don't need a tuner to use them across multiple bands. Building your own is a little bit more complicated because you need to build a matching unit, or it's not so much a balun but a transformer, because these have what's known as high impedance at the feed point. So it's a little bit more complicated, probably not something that you'd want to tackle if you're a newbie, but you can purchase these antennas if you want to make the investment. They can range from $50 to $60 for some very low power QRP ones, through to a couple of $100 for some higher end, high power ones. So have a look at those if you like, but my recommendation is to start with the linked dipole, and then if you decide later on that you want to move up to something like an end-fed, then by all means do that. So we've talked about what sort of radio you might want to consider getting. We've also talked about what sort of antenna you might want to think about investing in or constructing ideally. So the thing that we need to think about next is how to connect those two things together. Of course, we use, generally speaking, coaxial cable for that. There are other types of feed lines out there, but generally speaking, for portable use like ours, coax is going to be the one that you're going to use the most. So with coax cable, generally speaking, you get what you pay for. So some of the, I guess the more popular radio electronic stores that are around the place these days will sell you coaxial cable, but it's not necessarily the best. So invest in good quality coax. You can get what's known as RG58 or RG58/U cable. good quality stuff will cost you a few dollars a meter, and one of the key things about good quality cable is the shielding that is used in there. The more shielding the better. So some of the cables that you get from, say, J-Car and places like that sometimes aren't the best quality from that perspective, so really check it out. Once again, I'd suggest if you're unsure, look at cables from RF component suppliers. Okay, Andrews Communication, Strictly Ham, places like that will probably sell coaxial cable, or you can get cables through them somehow. Once again, if you're a member of a club or there is a club nearby, stop in and check out what they might have to offer you. Okay, you will need to get the right kind of connector for your radio and your antenna. Invariably, it's either a BNC or one of these guys, which is the PL259. These things are a dime a dozen and pretty much the go-to standard for HF connectors. Technically speaking, they're not a very good connector, but they're popular and they work, so there's no problems with that. And just like cables, connectors are also going to be variable in terms of their quality. Amphenol are a brand that are high quality and generally used quite a bit throughout the RF industry, as well as others, but they get quite expensive. So I would certainly recommend Amphenol. Okay, some of the cheaper ones have insulation that melts when you're soldering in here, so you just need to be very careful about that. If you're going to buy cable from somewhere, you can often get it pre-terminated for a few dollars more. If you're not confident, you haven't got any experience with terminating cables, then by all means don't feel too bad about getting a pre-terminated stuff. Once again, someone at a local club will be able to help you, hopefully be able to teach you how to put these on properly, and you'll be fairly self-sufficient from then on. So yeah, RG58U with PL259s, probably the best thing to look at the moment. Okay. Alright, so you've got your antenna up, you've connected it to your radio with your coax, you've got your radio all ready to go. Next thing we need to do is power the thing on. And when we're out portable, we don't usually have a power point lying around that we can plug into, so we have to take our power with us. Invariably, that's going to be a battery of some sort. What I've got here is a bit of an advanced type of battery. It's a LiFePO 4 battery, an 8400 milliamp hour battery from remote control cars, I think. Really good high density energy source, which is sort of the go-to battery these days, but about $100 plus the charger for it, which is a special one. So what I would recommend when you're first starting off is something like the good old 7 amp hour sealed lead acid batteries, which you can buy from pretty much anywhere, J-Car or Ultronics, or anybody sells them. They come out of alarm systems generally. They're the little battery packs that go in alarm systems. And if you're running 10 watts, okay, or 5 watts if you've got an 817, then 7 amp hours will give you a couple of hours worth of use. So they're about $25 each. Okay, you can get them second hand. Just be careful when buying second hand batteries. You don't really know what condition they're in, but they are pretty cheap and easy to get along with. Just make sure you get some decent connectors to go on there. What you're seeing now is actually probably a 75 amp hour sealed lead acid battery with some Anderson connectors on there. And Anderson connectors are pretty much the standard these days that most ham radio people use. Very easy to work with. But if you don't have any yet, or you're not sure how to wire them up, then don't stress. You can always use clips and connect to the battery terminals that way, or whatever you've got available. But do make sure that whatever you do use has a fuse in it that's rated for your particular radio. Most radios with the power supply that comes from the factory will have a fuse in it, so that should be okay. Always carry a spare fuse, because Murphy's Law says that you'll blow a fuse somehow, and if you don't have a spare one, then you might be stuck. If you don't have a battery, or for some reason you just don't have one available, you can of course use your car battery. if you want to, with perhaps some small alligator clips, and then connect back to your radio with a fuse, of course. If you're using a low power rig, maximum of 10 watts for example, then you should be able to use your car battery without any problems. Of course, one of the risks there is flattening your battery if you use it too much, but a low power rig should be fine if you're in a pinch. You may also be able to use your cigarette lighter connector as well, which will work fine in a portable radio situation. It's not recommended to use a cigarette lighter if you're using your radio in your car, if you're installing it in your vehicle permanently, for reasons I won't go into here. But just using your cigarette lighter connector outside your car should be fine for the time being. But most definitely get yourself a battery you can put in your bag and take with you, because you may not always have your car nearby. A couple of things before we close off the video. Things to consider is when you're out and you're making contacts, you're going to want to log them. So notebook and pencil. Okay, you can always sharpen a pencil with a knife. If you've got a pen and it runs out of ink, you're a bit stuffed. So pen or a pencil, a notebook. Always take a clock with you, okay, a watch or a clock, and if you can, get one that's in UTC time, because we often log, or we always log our contacts in UTC time. If you are doing a SOTA activation or a Parks and Peaks activation, you'll generally submit your logs to somebody for recording and scoring and updating, and all of those are in UTC. So always a good practice to get into UTC. Table and chair, okay, you want to be comfortable when you're out there operating, and maybe a bit of shelter if you might get into some inclement weather. Safety, okay, if you are going off the beaten track, let somebody know where you're going. Okay, your car can break down, or you can have an accident, or something can happen. So just make sure if you aren't near any roads or anything, that somebody knows where you are. And the one thing that really, I guess, I struggled with when I first wanted to start going out portable was why? What's the incentive? What's the reason to want to get out of bed and go and activate, or go and use my radios? And a couple of things that have come about in the last few years are Summits on the Air, or SOTA, as you may have come across it, and something called Parks and Peaks, and the WWFF, World Wildlife Flora and Fauna, I think that's what it stands for. Either way, these programs are designed to get people out there and using their radios from designated areas. SOTA is Summits on the Air, so around where you live there might be some SOTA summits that have been designated and recorded, which you can then go and set up and use your radios from, like I'm about to do here. And you get points for activating it, and people get points for contacting you when you're on a summit. So not only are you getting your experience and having a good time, but others are benefiting from it as well. Okay. Similarly with Parks and Peaks, you go to, in Australia at least, national parks, conservation parks, and there's thousands of those throughout our country. So you drive an hour in any direction and there's probably 5 or 6 parks that you can go to. And you just set up there and just start talking, and once again people are wanting to talk to you, so you're actually part of a community of people that want to talk to each other, okay, who are out portable. Okay, these people will understand if you're a beginner, if you're not real confident, and if you're not really sure what you're doing. You make a few mistakes, you'll trip up. They'll be patient, they'll help you, they'll encourage you, they'll guide you. So I would recommend strongly to look into those programs and get involved. With a dipole antenna or an inverted V antenna, as I mentioned, it needs a single support up the center. Now that can be either a rope up in a tree, or it can be a pole. Now if you've been following my channel for a while, you may have seen a video I did on portable masts for amateur radios. I'll put a link up here to that video. But basically one of the easiest ways to get your antenna set up is just with one of these poles. They're called a squid pole or a telescopic fiberglass pole. This heavy duty one can go up to 7 meters, and that will generally be okay to get you around Australia in most cases. About $40 or $50 for one of these, so a good investment, and you can reuse it over and over again. Always handy to have with you, because you can't always find somewhere else to put your antenna. I generally will throw a rope over a tree branch as high as I can. We just get a 20 metre long nylon rope from Bunnings for about $5, tie a little bit of a weight on the end, and after about 3 or 4 goes you'll get it over a high enough branch, and then you just pull the middle of the antenna up and away you go. You can't always do that. Sometimes there's not enough trees or the trees aren't high enough, so an investment in a pole like that is a really good idea. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've gotten something out of this. I know I've been sitting here and talking for a while, but I would really look forward to seeing you on the air. One of the things that has come up recently, particularly here in Adelaide, is something called the F-Troop net, which is run by the Northeast Radio Club, and Tony VK5 FBIC is running that at the moment. That's on Friday nights at 5 PM on the Houghton repeater, 146/850, and a lot of new operators on there, a lot of F calls. Of course, that's what it's designed for, but anybody's welcome. Yeah, so please check it out if you're in range or you've got time. So thanks for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.